Good morning, everyone. So here I'm with another video. This one is related to the digestive system. Uh, so part one of digestive system has already been uploaded. This is the second part wherein I'll be talking about the esophagus and the associate digestive gland as well as the small intestine. So esophagus basically is also known as the food pipe. So the esophagus runs behind the trachea, as you can see here. The esophagus runs behind the trachea. It's a muscular tube. Its walls are lined by involuntary muscles, which are capable of peristalsis, that is generating a wave of contraction. And though that wave of contraction carries the bolus or the food that is swallowed from the mouth down towards the stomach. No chemical digestion takes place in the esophagus because the wall of the esophagus does not secrete any kind of enzyme. The function of esophagus is to conduct the food by peristalsis up to the stomach. Now, at the junction of the esophagus and the stomach, there lies a muscle called as the cardiac sphincter. Now, sphincters are basically circular muscles that regulate the opening and the closing of the junction between two body parts or organs. So cardiac sphincter lies at the junction between the esophagus and the stomach. So the reason that it has been given this name is because it lies close to the heart. Okay, and that's why it is given this name, that is cardiac sphincter. As you can see here, lies close to the heart, and hence the name, the cardiac sphincter. When the food arrives at this junction, the cardiac sphincter will relax, allowing the food to enter into the stomach. Okay. Now, as far as stomach is concerned, it's a roughly J-shaped bag-like structure that lies below the diaphragm on the left side of the abdominal cavity. I repeat, it is a roughly J-shaped bag-like structure or an organ that lies below the diaphragm on the left side of the abdominal cavity. So here is the diaphragm, as you can see, the muscular sheath that separates the thorax from the abdomen, and the stomach lies below the diaphragm on the left side of the abdominal cavity. Now, if we look at the wall of the stomach basically consists of several layers of muscles. So there is longitudinal muscles, circular muscles, and oblique muscles. Otherwise, elsewhere in the alimentary canal, you will only find two layers of muscles, the longitudinal and the circular. But in stomach, you have an additional layer, that is the oblique layer. And that is what makes the wall more thicker as far as stomach is concerned. So these folds that you see inside the stomach, if I zoom in, you can see the folds there. Now these folds are called rugae, which disappear when the stomach gets filled with food. I repeat, the rugae will disappear when the stomach gets filled with food. Now, the stomach internally is lined by gastric glands. Now, these gastric glands are responsible for the secretion of certain enzymes. I repeat, I'll just type it here. So, the gastric glands, they secrete the gastric juice. Contents of gastric juice include one is hydrochloric acid. Now, this hydrochloric acid stops the action of amylase, which was secreted in the saliva, and that was converting starch to maltose. Okay. So, we have already heard that every enzyme requires a particular kind of a pH. So, for salivary amylase, acidic environment is not a suitable one. And that's why its action stops. So that's one of the functions of hydrochloric acid. Second function of hydrochloric acid is activation of an inactive enzyme present in the gastric juice called pepsinogen to pepsin. So pepsinogen is basically an inactive enzyme which gets converted to active form pepsin. Further, there's another enzyme called prorenin, mainly found in children. Now, this prorenin is responsible for breaking down milk protein, but it is the inactive enzyme. It is converted again back to active form by HCl. So just like pepsinogen is converted to pepsin, even prorenin has to be first converted to renin. And the fourth action of hydrochloric acid is to kill any kind of germs or bacteria that we have accidentally ingested along with food. Now, apart from these three substances, the gastric juice also contains mucus. Now, the secretion of mucus is very important because the hydrochloric acid makes the environment very acidic, and that could be corrosive on the lining of the stomach. So, to prevent or protect the lining of the stomach, mucus is also secreted as a part of the gastric juice. So, that will try to protect the internal lining or the inner lining of the stomach. Now, role of pepsin. So, pepsin will convert proteins present in a food into peptides. So, proteins are converted to peptides. So, proteins are very long chains of amino acids. Peptides are comparatively shorter chains of amino acids. And the role of renin. So, renin converts milk protein casein to paracasein, which is insoluble. So, casein is a soluble milk protein, and it is converted to paracasein by the action of renin. Now, the food is thoroughly churned inside the stomach, and after about 2 to 3 hours, it is converted into a semi-solid pulp-like form, which is called as the bolus. So, after 2 to 3 hours of partial digestion in the stomach, the food that arrived is now converted into a semi-solid or a semi-liquid paste-like structure, which is called as the bolus. Which is called as the chyme, chyme. Okay, so I repeat, the food after digestion in the stomach, partial digestion in the stomach is converted into chyme. Now, this chyme will be released from the stomach into the duodenum. Again, through a junction which is guarded by a sphincter called as the pylorus. Okay, so I repeat here. So this is called as the pylorus or the pyloric sphincter. So this pylorus or the pyloric sphincter will regulate the passage of the chyme from the stomach into the duodenum. Okay, so duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. So the entry of food into the duodenum is guarded or regulated by the pyloric sphincter. The word pylorus means gatekeeper because it acts as a gatekeeper to regulate the passage of food from the stomach into the small intestine. Moving on to the small intestine. The small intestine is the main site of digestion of food, as well as it is also the site for absorption of the digested food. Now, apart from receiving the contents from the stomach, the duodenum of the small intestine also basically receives juices from the liver as well as the pancreas. So let us first see the areas or the parts of the small intestine. Small intestine, as you all are already aware, is the longest part of the alimentary canal, roughly about 6 meters in length, out of which duodenum is only 25 centimeters. It's a small loop-like structure which receives the contents from the stomach as well as it receives the bile juice from the liver or the gallbladder, and it will also receive the pancreatic juice from the pancreas. Then you have the jejunum. Now, this is roughly about 2 meters long, and usually in post-mortem analysis, jejunum is found to be empty. Post-mortem means after death. Okay, so whenever the contents are analyzed, jejunum usually is found to be empty. And then you have the ileum, which is the longest part of the small intestine, roughly about 4 meters long. The word ileum itself means twisted and coiled because of its highly twisted and coiled nature. Now, reason why small intestine is so long and so coiled is because that serves as the site for the absorption of the digested food. So if it would have been straight and short, then very little time would have been available to absorb all the digested content. And that's why the intestine is very long and highly curled. Let us first talk about the action of the bile juice that is secreted by the liver, as well as the pancreatic juice that is produced by the pancreas. The liver, the gallbladder, salivary gland, pancreas are all accessory digestive organs. They are not a part of the alimentary canal, but they open into the alimentary canal and release their secretion. Now, as such, the gallbladder does not produce any secretion, but it stores the secretion produced by the liver. So, as far as the liver is concerned, it is the largest gland in the body, located again below the diaphragm, but on the right side of the abdominal cavity. On the left side, we have the stomach, and on the right side, we have the liver. So, because the liver is the largest gland and occupies the left side of the abdominal cavity, when you will move to higher grades, you will study the location of the kidney, and you will be informed that the right kidney is slightly lower in position than the left one to accommodate the liver. I repeat, the right kidney is slightly lower than the left one to accommodate the liver. So that's the reason for that being that liver is the largest gland and it occupies most of the right side of the abdominal cavity below the diaphragm. So location of liver, I repeat again, is the right side of the abdomen below the diaphragm. Now this liver produces or secretes the bile juice. Now, it produces bile juice by the breakdown of the dead and the worn out RBCs. So the dead and the worn out RBCs will release or secrete the bile that will then be released or secreted via the common hepatic duct. So if you can see my mouse pointer here, so that is basically the left that's the left hepatic duct. Here you have the right hepatic duct joining together to form the common hepatic duct. Now, just for your information, just like we call anything related to the heart as cardio or cardiac, anything related to the liver is called as hepatic. So the left hepatic duct and the right hepatic duct will join together to form this common hepatic duct. Now, this common hepatic duct will either directly by itself secrete or release the bile into the duodenum. I'll just trace the path. Here you can see. Or the bile juice produced by the liver may be temporarily stored in the gallbladder. So what I'm about to annotate on my screen right now in green is the cystic duct. The cystic duct comes from the gallbladder. The blue one is the common bile duct coming from the liver. Okay, so common hepatic duct, sorry. The common hepatic duct and the cystic duct together join and form this common bile duct, which I'm annotating in yellow. So the blue one is the common hepatic duct, the green one is the cystic duct, and the yellow one is the common bile duct. So together, the gallbladder and the liver release the bile when food enters into the duodenum. Now, bile is produced by the liver by the breakdown of the dead and the worn out RBC. The major constituents of bile include of course, it's a juice, so there will be water present in it. Then you have the bile pigment. There are two bile pigments, bilirubin and biliverdin, which are responsible for imparting the yellow color to bile. Then the third one being the bile salt. Okay. And there is sodium bicarbonate. So these are four major constituents of bile: water, bile pigment, bilirubin and biliverdin, bile salt, and sodium bicarbonate. Now, the function of bile pigments is to impart color to the fecal matter. It's not a function as such, but yes, that is what they are known for, to impart color to the fecal matter. Bile salts definitely have a function, that is to emulsify the fat. So function of bile juice is for emulsification of fat, bile salt, sorry. The word emulsification means to break down large molecules into smaller droplets, because fats are very large size structures. So it's important to break them down into smaller particles so that the enzymes can act on them in a better way. So to enhance the enzymatic action on fats, they need to be emulsified, and bile salts present in the bile juice are responsible for emulsification of fat. Sodium bicarbonate is, again, plays a very key role because it helps to neutralize the chyme. If you remember what is chyme, chyme is basically the contents that are coming from the stomach. So after partial digestion in the stomach, the food is converted into a pulp-like form that is called chyme, which is neutralized by sodium bicarbonate. So it neutralizes the chyme. Now, this neutralization is important because the enzymes present in the pancreatic juice as well as in the intestinal juice cannot act under acidic medium. They cannot act under acidic medium, and therefore it's important that the bile juice which contains sodium bicarbonate is released first as soon as the chyme arrives to neutralize it, so that the pancreatic juice containing pancreatic enzymes can act on the food. Now let us talk about the pancreatic juice as well. The pancreas is a leaf-like gland located behind the stomach. Now this gland is a mixed gland. It is endocrine as well as exocrine. The endocrine function is related to production of hormones like insulin and glucagon that regulate the blood glucose level. And the exocrine gland is related to production of certain enzymes which help in digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, as well as fats. Now, the enzymes in the pancreatic juice include this pancreatic amylase, also called as amylopsin. It will break down leftover starch to maltose. Then there is an inactive enzyme called trypsinogen. Now, this trypsinogen is first converted to trypsin. Its active form is called trypsin. And trypsin converts proteins and peptides to smaller peptides and amino acids. Further, the pancreatic juice also contains pancreatic lipase. That lipase is also called CFsin. Now, CFsin, it converts emulsified fat. If you remember, the fats were emulsified by the bile salts present in the bile juice, and they are broken down into fatty acids and glycerol by CFsin, also known as pancreatic amylase. So these are the four enzymes, that is amylopsin, trypsinogen, and CFsin. These are the three enzymes. Trypsinogen, however, is inactive. It is converted to active form trypsin by an enzyme called enterokinase present in the intestinal juice. So a lot of contents that came in from the stomach are now being broken down. Fat digestion has started in the duodenum. Proteins are further being broken down, and the leftover starch, we know that the action of salivary amylase had stopped in the stomach due to acidic environment. So the leftover starch in the food is converted to maltose, a disaccharide, by the action of the enzyme amylopsin, also known as pancreatic amylase. Now, moving on to the intestinal juice quickly. Now, before we move on to the intestinal juice, it's important for us to just 1 minute. I'll just clear off my annotations. Yeah. Now, it is important for us to know how exactly the the liver and the small pancreas pour their contents into the small intestine. So you can just follow my annotation. So this is the common, sorry. Different color. Yeah, so this white colored part is the common hepatic duct coming from the liver. Then this blue colored part is the cystic duct coming from the gallbladder. And then the two ducts combine together to form this uh, common bile duct, which will open into the duodenum. So that is how the bile is poured into the duodenum. The pancreatic juice is released, that is produced by the pancreas, is released via this pancreatic duct. And this pancreatic duct also jointly opens along with the common bile duct into the duodenum. Okay. So that is how the contents of the pancreas and the liver as well as gallbladder are secreted into the duodenum. Now, let us move on to the location of the pancreas, and then we move on to our next step, that is the small intestine. So if you want to see the location of the pancreas, this will be a very ideal image to follow it. So if I just flip over this image, if I turn it up behind, you can clearly see that the pancreas lies behind the stomach. I repeat again, the pancreas lies behind the stomach. So unlike your 2D diagrams that are printed in the textbook, please remember that the pancreas lies behind the stomach, not below the stomach. In 2D diagrams, it will be shown below, but in actual position, it is behind the stomach. Now, let us talk about the intestinal juice and its contents. So, intestinal juice, it is secreted by the glands present in the walls of the intestine. Now, the enzymes, main enzymes present in the intestinal juice are enterokinase. Now, this enterokinase converts trypsinogen to trypsin. And there is an enzyme called erepsin, also known as peptidase. It converts smaller peptides to amino acids. Then you have the enzyme called as lipase. This is intestinal lipase, which converts emulsified fat to fatty acids and glycerol. Then the next one is maltase, which converts maltose, a disaccharide, to glucose. Maltose is made up of two glucose molecules. Then there is the enzyme sucrase or invertase, which converts sucrose to glucose plus fructose. And then the next enzyme is lactase, which breaks down the milk sugar, that is lactose. of glucose and galactose. So finally, in the small intestine, all possible. So once the small intestine, the digesting system is provided with finger-like foldings or projections called villi, which I'll be discussing in my next segment. Thank you. Keep watching. Keep learning.